street flooding event. Now, if that had been, as I said, over more rural areas, over the marshier areas, no harm, no foul. It doesn't affect anyone. But when those type of individual cells are able to develop across the metro area, especially over Orleans Parish, we can get those flooding threats. Now, as I said, with regards to that, these were some excessive rainfall totals that you would likely have seen street flooding. They became a little bit more worsened by the fact that it was in the vicinity of that underpass on Canal Boulevard, an area, as you heard folks say, that live around there, floods every time we have any kind of downpour. So that was almost a given that that area was going to flood. And as I said, a lot of the reports of the flooding that we had been hearing about prior to going out to this water rescue were all of the usual suspects, all of the intersections, all of the areas that always tend to flood when we get these heavier downpours, and that happened to have been one of them. We do still have some thunderstorm, or at least some rainfall developing down toward the coast, down the bayou, that are moving northward, so we're not done with the rainfall yet. If we can keep these storms just moving, then we're in okay shape. Now, we don't want to exacerbate the issues that we have had over Metro New Orleans, but you know, a brief little downpour passing quickly is not going to worsen those concerns by a lot if they move. If they don't, like we had from around parts of the city, Lakeview and Mid-City, then we could get some additional issues. As I also said, you saw what some of those heard some of the reports and have actually seen. I believe we're going back out to Lakeview. Okay, no, this is Canal Boulevard. There's Lakeview. Again, it's one of those, yeah, you're in a Jeep, guy, but just don't make the drive. First off, you're creating a wake to some of the cars that may have gotten out of this high and dry. You're creating a wake, and just don't do it. If you see that standing water, obviously the duration of his drive down, where's this again? Memphis and what was the cross street here? And Lane, I'm sorry, Memphis and Lane. Avoid this at all costs. We continue to see vehicles trying to make their way down, but again, you're creating a wake into these cars that have been spared from any flooding. You're creating a wake issue for backyards, for some of the homes, garages, which are usually at street level. Just avoid them at all costs. Do not try and cross these. If this is your neighborhood, just kind of park away and hang for a little while. Hopefully, as we've had the break in the rainfall, drainage will start to take over, and we should start to see these streets clearing shortly. But you know, these folks in the larger vehicles that always assume they can get right through, yeah, maybe your vehicle makes it out, but all of these smaller vehicles and front yards, backyards still have the ongoing issue with now the wake that you're creating. So again, just I'll get off my soapbox here for a moment as we continue to monitor the situation. Again, from the rainfall totals that we had seen across parts of the metro area, some of the highest totals were in this mid-city, even toward the lakefront. Now, as far as I know, we've not really had any reports of some of the higher totals, say, as you move up toward, say, Milneburg, UNO at the lakefront, out toward the Seabrook Bridge, Lakefront Airport. These were some of the pockets of more of the heavy. And most of the estimates on radar, and again, these are radar estimates, are anywhere from, again, mid-city, 2.5, 3.5 to 4.5 inches of rainfall, and you're getting pockets of about the same. So it's kind of this swath of about 3 to almost 5 inches of rain that fell, and again, a very short period of time. One of the low spots is that underpass in Mid-City, so the surrounding water is all making its way toward that underpass. That's why Eleanor said it looks like the water is rising, despite the fact that as we switch back over to radar, there is no additional rain there. We have finally gotten clear of the rain, so thankfully we have enough of a break here, and hopefully that is the duration of the afternoon. No additional rainfall here. That would be fantastic, but as I was showing you on a wider radar loop, there are additional showers, thunderstorms that are popping up and all moving toward the north. Now, not necessarily in and kind of following that exact same path. We have kind of seen that at least come to an end for now. That's not to say we are completely done with that rainfall, as we may still see some passing showers. As long as even the moderate to heavy rainfall moves, even if it's a fairly excessive rainfall rate, it should be okay. May add to those totals by a little bit, but as long as the rain moves, because most of these thunderstorms that have at least a little bit of a forward trajectory have been moving at a decent little clip. So they're not just sitting in any one place. That was the issue of the storm we saw over Mid-City and elsewhere, was that it just sat for several hours. We were kind of timing that out. In the City Park, Mid-City vicinity, they had basically ongoing rain from before the noon hour until after 3 o'clock. Not that that entire area was in the heavy rainfall for 3 hours, but there were parts that were getting at least some kind of rain for more than 3 hours. And again, if the surrounding area near that Canal Boulevard underpass had some rain, that water has to find the lowest point, and that lowest point is that underpass. And so that's why it looks like that water was actually still rising, based on one of the earlier reports from Eleanor, that she, even after the rain had ended, could see that the water levels were continuing to rise. So far, I don't remember if there was another water rescue happening, but we did report earlier the Canal Boulevard, actually, that we were showing you. Thankfully, those two gentlemen have been moved to safety and are being cared for right now. So thankfully, no worse reports that we are getting in. And Alexandra, you were getting those water rescue reports. It was that one, and was there another one? Yeah, at Lake Avenue, but we haven't heard too much more about that one so far.
Right.
Okay, so we had Lake Avenue Canal. We've been on Canal. We've been showing you those two gentlemen safely being taken from their car. And then Lake Avenue was another water rescue being reported. Thankfully, we've not heard any additional, not to say that that's a good thing or a bad thing, but we've not heard anything additional coming out of that second water rescue thus far. And as I said, we are getting more breaks in this rainfall here over the metro area. And some folks are saying, well, wait, look, I'm getting in on some very heavy rainfall here out toward Rudock, Manchac, LaPlace, and kind of further into the river parishes. Thankfully, this is starting to move more into the northern part of the parish, into Livingston, St. Helena eventually. These heavier thunderstorms are moving more over the marshes as you move into Lake Maurepas. So thankfully, those storms, and while intense, at least as you watch them, have been moving. So you're not going to get the rainfall accumulation totals that we have seen across parts of the metro area. And as I said, thankfully enough, while bad, this was still fairly isolated. This was only over a few neighborhoods as far as just the metro area goes. It was over a fairly isolated part. Of course, it happens to be over one of the parts of the city that tends to flood anytime we get a heavy downpour, although that could be said about just about all of the metro area. However, that storm has since wound down. We have seen more of a break in the rainfall over the last, say, 30 to 40 minutes or so. So we've had a decent break from that heavier rainfall across the region, where they are still ongoing with the street flooding concerns. Again, as folks are now getting closer to that rush hour time frame, if you see the standing water, I don't care how large your vehicle is, yeah, maybe you're able to get through it, but the surrounding vehicles and homes may not be able to get through it based on your wake. So just use an alternate route. There are streets that have no water issues. Use those, find those routes, and avoid any of the street flooding. Again, maybe you're in a larger vehicle, a larger profile vehicle that won't stall out, but you may cause some issues to other people. Alexandra Cranford has also been monitoring the situation and has taken a look at some of those storms out in the river parishes.
Yeah, that's what I was actually tracking, Chris. And the big thing this afternoon has been, of course, the heavy rain, and also that we are watching, just for flooding, of course. But I wanted to also point out that we have some hail reports right now coming from around French Settlement. There's been a train spotter who says quarter size hail for this particular storm, or out toward kind of Gonzales and French Settlement. But this is what our hail tracker is looking at right now. It indicates pea-size hail possible with this system right to the south of Lake Maurepas, not far from LaPlace. So that's not too bad, but we could easily see it get a little bit bigger. And we do have that big complex of strong thunderstorms and heavy thunderstorms out there. So we're tracking kind of that more as our shift toward what is actively coming down around the Lake Maurepas area. Now, thankfully, it looks like some of the heavier rain here, like Chris was pointing out, is kind of moving, so may not have all of the same kind of concerns as what we were seeing in some parts of New Orleans and other spots. If there is a spot of that tends to flood out here, you might rethink going through that, but at least there's a little bit of drier conditions coming around the Lutcher area already. At Gonzales, seeing things a bit drier with that cell passing off to the east and to the northeast. So still tracking that in New Orleans, though, jumping over to what we were seeing for the city. Again, there's a bit of rain showing up around Kenner and Metairie now. Thankfully, though, it's a lot lighter, light to moderate rain for that area. And we'll go back to the, we'll go to Chris in a second. It looks like we're going to go to Charisse and Katie right now.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Alexandra. Of course, a situation out there with some street flooding. There were reports of water rescues happening. And Colin Arnold with the New Orleans Emergency Management Office is joining us by phone now to give us the latest on what's happening out there. Thanks for being with us.
Hey, thanks, Katie. Thanks, Charisse.
Yeah. What can you tell us about those water rescues? Is everybody okay out there?
Yeah, we're not getting any reports of injuries right now. We know that Canal Boulevard was the location, and I know that there were some vehicles that were flooded at Downman Road and Hain Boulevard.
Yeah, I just got pictures in for that.
Two areas that typically, as Chris was talking about, tend to start to collect water rather quickly. This is, we had some. We're getting into that time of year as we enter in May. We've had several weeks, I think, of relatively dry climate, and now we're heading into May, and I think this is a reminder that we're going to start seeing these afternoon type events occur, and that people really need to be careful when they're driving. 6 inches of water can start to immobilize a regular vehicle, and about a little less than a foot with an SUV. But really, turn around, don't drown. It looks like we're getting through the most of this. I think the heaviest rain was due to the slow movement of these storms earlier. They're starting to clear out now, but no injuries that we're seeing right now. We've got probably about 15 areas around the city on Streetwise that are showing reports of street flooding. Sewage and Water Board has 93 of 99 pumps. I've heard of no issues of them today, and in fact, many of these areas are already starting to drain. None of the underpass pumps are affected. So really, this is just a matter of, our folks given the pumps time to, clear out some of this water that tends to collect in low areas.
Colin, right now, I don't know if you have your eye on the screen, but we're showing one of the water rescues. This is at the underpass that's on Canal Boulevard, a place that we typically see flood fairly often and fairly quickly. We have some signs out there that alert people to when not to go underneath this underpass, but it seems like this is a continuous problem here where people are still getting stuck under here and water still continues to collect under that area. What are we doing to fix that?
Well, I mean, there's two prongs to that. One is obviously the lights come on when there's pressure triggers activated in the bottom of the basin there, and that will flash red lights that say high water, do not enter. Unfortunately, folks need to listen up and really look and heed those warnings. What we can also do is put out barricades as well, and that is something that we can do to really try and prevent this, and that's what we'll continue to do.
These two gentlemen appear to have some health issues, and hopefully they were taken out. You said nobody was hurt. Talk about the pump situation in Lakeview, because we also had some video that we were showing a little while ago about with some street flooding that really didn't appear to be moving a whole lot. Do you see, or are you hearing that the street flooding is now starting to ease? Are the pumps catching up?
Yes, I'm hearing that it's starting to ease and that the pumps are catching up. I have their latest report from just the other day of 93 of 99 pumps operational or able to operate. They have adequate power and redundant power systems. I should mention that we currently have about a little over 3,000 customers without power, mostly in Gentilly and the lakefront heading out towards New Orleans East. That's down from 5,800 earlier this afternoon. And I think those restorations will continue rapidly once the conditions are improved enough for the utility crews to get out there and fix those things.
Are any of those three pumps that are not functioning in Lakeview, do you know?
I don't know offhand. Let me take a look. I don't know that right offhand.
Okay, we'll have to check more closely at that and see if that's the situation out there. It seems like the water is just kind of standing there a bit.
Yeah, it's taken a while to go down. That video we showed you a little bit earlier. One of the men that was rescued, EMS did arrive and spoke with both of those men. One of our reporters was live out there speaking to them. Hopefully we can get an update on how they're doing, but it seemed like one was having somewhat of what it looked like was a medical emergency out there. I have to say, other than the obvious, the over underpasses that are closed, are there any other streets right now that we're asking people to avoid at this point?
No, I would just say to use a lot of caution in the mid-city Gentilly and portions of New Orleans East, particularly out towards the lake. That seems to be where the majority of the heaviest rainfall occurred. Obviously, we're looking at some numbers right now of anywhere from 2 to 3 inches in some areas. I've got one report of 4 inches in around Canal Boulevard in that area. I'm a little suspect about that number. That might have to be, we have to recheck the rainfall on that area.
It really seemed that the rain was coming in waves at points this afternoon, especially in that mid-city area that you're talking about, which unfortunately is one of those places that even our down the drain investigation covered several years ago. But it's an area that tends to flood, and if you did see that level of rainfall in a short period of time, you can see why the pumps would have a hard time keeping up.
Yeah, that's correct. I'm still trying to find that pump and power report while on the fly here, but to see about the Lakeview stations. But to my knowledge, there's been no issues with the pumping at this point. I spoke with Sewage and Water Board about an hour ago, and they were in rain mode and continue to work. I think what we're seeing is there was a lot of back building behind these storms. They just kept regenerating behind themselves, and that's what continued this rain. And that's what happens when you have afternoon heating, when we're starting to get up into the 80s and 90s, and we start, seeing those humidity levels. We're going to start seeing that instability, and these types of training rain events and back building rain events can occur.
Yeah, we're going to have to check with our meteorologist to see if we can expect another round coming through in the next couple of hours. And then, of course, keep a close eye on those pumps and see if they have drained enough in order to be able to take on that water.
Right. We have lifted neutral ground parking restrictions until 6 p.m. We'll reevaluate that based on what we're seeing tonight and then tomorrow for the forecast as well. So stay tuned for that. We'll obviously push that out. And this is an opportunity, if you haven't signed up yet, you can text NOLA Ready, one word, NOLA Ready, to 77295 and receive those updates real time.
All right, Colin, thank you so much for that update. We're going to check back in with you a little bit later, but for right now, we want to go back over to our chief meteorologist, Chris Franklin, with the latest. Chris, when it was coming in, there were a few people who said that they saw no rain at all. I saw only a couple of sprinkles, just some rainfall at my home. In areas like Mid-City, though, it seemed like they were drenched.
Yeah, again, as I said, these were very more scattered in nature. Rain coverage across the region has been at about 50%, so some did not see anything. Others had at least some rainfall, and then in a very isolated spot, we got that flooding rainfall, and that was the issue. And of course, it really depends upon where those type of cells that remain almost stationary, or as Colin correctly described it, as kind of back building. You kind of see a little bit of motion of the storm, but then it almost seems like in one particular area, it just keeps generating that rain over and over again, and so it just sits, and that's exactly what happened. It just happened to be over parts of City Park, the Lakeview, and Mid-City. Now, kind of looking on the wide scale, this is all in association with an upper disturbance that is off the Texas coast. You can kind of see that spin right here. So it is moving a little bit closer, kind of in our direction. So some of the storms that we do have to our west may try and inch their way in our direction, or in the direction of Metro New Orleans. However, with that said, these storms are moving, and so far the storms that we have seen thus far this morning and afternoon have not really prompted too many major flooding issues. We do a street flooding advisory for Baton Rouge, but the rain is moving, so I kind of widen out just to show you that there is additional storminess down off the coast, and all of this is moving north, and there does seem to be a gradual trend of this rain toward the east. So as I said, we are not done with the rainfall, unfortunately, but we hope to see is that whatever rain we would see for the rest of the evening and night would be just that, kind of moving very quickly. Not that we want to see any of that, but if we have to deal with any additional rainfall through the rest of this afternoon and evening, we'd be better off with some of these moving showers where the accumulations would be minor, more of a few tenths of an inch at the most. Maybe you're talking about several tenths of an inch, but that would be about it if we can just continue to see the rainfall moving. I was looking at one of our computer models, and again, the models sometimes do poorly with these type of situations. Again, it is not perfect with exactly where all of the rainfall is, but kind of watching the trend of the rain over the coming hours may still have this ongoing in some spotty areas for the next couple of hours, but then after about 7, 8 o'clock, the model trend looks to be we will be drying out. So may have another few hours of this before we see a drying trend and far less rainfall expected during the day tomorrow. We'll dive more into the radar and coming up just a moment, looking ahead to rainfall potential over the next several days, but Eleanor Tabone remains out on Canal Boulevard and has a little bit more about our water rescue. Eleanor?
That's right, Chris. Out here on Canal Boulevard, you can see the water is starting to go down. Clearly, the pumps are working out here. When we got out here, it was at to 3.5 feet, nearly got to 4. Now you can see how far this water has gotten down since the rain really started. Now you can see here the car that was trapped in the floodwaters underneath the underpass. You can see the driver of the car is still on the scene. His cousin, who was here as well, was transported via EMS to the hospital. I spoke to the driver moments ago, Chris. He told me that his cousin tried to get out of the car and then fell in the water, and then with the panic and the shock, he started going underneath the water, kept going underneath the water. Now, we spoke to the man that works across the street, Chris, who pulled the gentleman who went under the water, the cousin, pulled him out of the water. He explained to us that he saw him going up and down, and he said, I saw him go under the water and he didn't come back up. So he pulled him out of the water. Now, the business owner we spoke to said when he pulled the gentleman up, he told me that he smelled alcohol on the gentleman that he rescued. So that's what he told us. But again, Chris, you can see how much this water has gone down since we first came out here. We also spoke to a witness that works on the other side of Canal Boulevard earlier, and she mentioned how often cars and people get trapped in this underpass. Now, Canal Boulevard is still blocked off right now, so please stay away from the area. But again, the water does appear to be receding versus at least half an hour ago. Chris?
Yeah, that's more than just appears to be receding. That is dramatic. And I will say, we were speaking to Colin Arnold a moment ago, and he said, the pumping capacity, everything seems to be working. That definitely is working. When we joined you near the top of the hour, as we were reporting, the water levels were approaching 4 feet. And earlier, it looked like even as the rain had stopped, the water level, according to Eleanor, was still kind of inching up. So even after the rain had ended, that water level was still climbing a bit, only because that is the low point in that area. So all of the water is what little hillage we have here. It was all moving downhill, and so that water was still rising. Obviously, fairly dramatic drop in about, I don't know, a half hour or so the last time we were speaking with Eleanor. So it went from about 4 feet down to 2, and now kind of manageable. Still, I would not try and drive across that. It is still way too deep, but obviously a dramatic improvement with the underpass there at Canal. So talking about it maybe not until later this evening, it looks like conditions are dramatically improved there. Now, as I also said, we have had quite a break from that intense rainfall, and there are certainly more breaks in the rain. However, we are not done with the rainfall. Unfortunately, kind of a line of storms setting up from Thibodaux down toward Houma. These might have a little bit of an easterly component to the direction, but generally they're moving almost due north. Again, there may be a little bit of a component to an easterly or a little easterly motion to that, but generally north or south to north, moving generally due north. Still some thunderstorms developing across parts of the region, metro area, but so far those have been all fairly minor in terms of not moving very quickly and not nearly as heavy as that rainfall was earlier. So even where we have the ongoing flash flood warning, again, a lot of folks think, well, the flood warning, it's not raining, so why is the flood warning still in place? It is because that standing water does take time to completely recede. While we have seen a dramatic improvement at Canal Boulevard, the underpass, it is still very high. The reports that we are getting in and showing you in Lakeview, the water remains very high, and for some vehicles still impassable. And even if it is passable with a larger vehicle, just try not to, I know as a kid it was kind of fun to go in and play in the water, and some kids out there, I would not recommend it, just because you have no idea what is just below that water line, where it suddenly dips off into a pothole, or what kind of critters have started to come out in that water. Not exactly something I would want to go and play in. We did have that story a little while ago of the street flooding from not rainfall. And that 2-lane swimmer swimming in it, you know, the water is pretty disgusting. So not something I would personally recommend doing, but again, I'm not a kid anymore, so maybe that's why. But obviously still an issue with the standing water. You know, you kind of gauge the depth of that water. That's a little more of a nuisance. But I tell you what, for a larger vehicle kind of driving through that and creating a wake, some of these folks, and I know we've had many reports of folks. You know, we get those reports of vehicles that were spared. They were able to get to higher ground in time, and their car was spared from any flooding, and then a larger vehicle like a school bus comes scooting by and creates a wake, and now you've got water in your car, in your home, in your business, across your front lawn, the backyard, which might have been spared from any real issue. You know, when you see that water, I just see a line of cars trying to drive down it, including a pizza delivery. You know, it's just best not to. There is definitely motion. You can see the moving water. That tends not to be an issue here. All right, this is Elysian Fields and Fillmore. So again, kind of in that direction toward the lakefront out near UNO. That's where we were estimating some of our highest rainfall totals. That's kind of range of about 3.5 to 4.5 inches of rain. And again, a lot of that fell after the noon hour, and here we are almost 4 o'clock. Most of that rainfall ended at around 3. These are the parts of the city where we had those highest totals. Obviously, for convenience sake, people are going to use Elysian Fields as a major thoroughfare, but when you see that standing water, I would just highly advise using an alternate route. If nothing else for your own vehicle, all it takes is a little dip into a slightly deeper part of that water, and you've stalled your vehicle, and now you're stuck and waiting for someone to come and tow your car out. Just, you know, we see it all the time. I feel like we've explained it enough. I mean, folks are going to make their own decisions. Whatever. But we've gotten the breaks from that heavy rainfall, thankfully. The flash flood warnings will continue. We still have some heavy rainfall here and there, not as intense, nor are they stationary that we had earlier. But unfortunately, we're not done with the rainfall. However, as I was just showing you a computer model, it does look like the trend will be as we start to lose a little bit more of that daytime heating. Now, this isn't, again, driven by daytime heating. That would be more of our typical summertime thunderstorms. Those are the daytime heating, the triggering mechanism with those thunderstorms in the June, July, August, early September is the daytime heating. This is mainly associated with an upper low, which is off the Texas, Southwest Louisiana coastline. This actually should start moving north during the day, and our rain chances tomorrow at about 20-30%. So I'm decreasing our rain chances quite a bit as that upper system will be moving on. Might see another upper disturbance which triggers our rain chances a little bit more for Thursday, but we should get quite a bit more of a break during the day tomorrow. So you kind of watch this, almost looks like a band of rain that is moving through. This is all in association with that upper low, which is off to our west. So again, we're not done with the rainfall, but we do not have those individual cells such as the one that moved over the city. We don't see that. That doesn't appear to have been a trend over the last couple of hours, so I'm hoping that is a trend which will continue into the evening.
Chris, when you look at those cells that you're talking about right now that came over New Orleans and Mid-City, is there any way to tell from the radar how much rain actually fell?
When you go into our rainfall estimates, and we can look at some of the rainfall totals, but the rainfall total maps are only as good as the stations. If we have enough stations in these areas, then we can get actual readings. So the best we can do is radar estimates, and this does pretty much coincide with some of the rainfall total numbers that we have seen. The city of New Orleans actually has a pretty extensive weather network across the entirety of the parish with weather stations at various locations, including rainfall rates, rainfall totals, hour-long rainfall totals, 24-hour rainfall totals, dew point, relative humidity, and some of the totals that we were saying, and you did hear from Coronado, who was kind of suspicious of some of those totals saying 4 inches of rainfall. Well, sometimes that those 4 inches seem suspect just because that is a lot, even for Southeast Louisiana. That is a lot, and not something we see very often, thankfully.
But it looks like it might be true based
But
on
when
your
we
numbers
do
there.
see it, we get that kind of flooding and the amounts that you would expect to see in the streets. And when you look at the totals from the NOLA Ready, I can't remember the website off the top of my head, as well as Streetwise
yes.
website, which is a great website, by the way, as well as our Doppler radar estimates, those seem pretty much in line. So I would venture to say in some of the heaviest, the totals were probably in excess of 4 inches of rainfall. And again, consider that most of that was after the noon hour and ended before 3. So about a 2.5 to 3 hour time frame, 4.5 inches of rainfall will cause some problems. Even 4 inches of rainfall over 24 hours will cause some kind of flooding issues, usually minor, but that much rain in a short period of time will definitely cause those problems.
And do you think those strong cells that are to the west are going to make its way over that area, like in Lakeview, for example, where the roads are still draining? Are we going to get hit with another significant rain event in a few minutes?
It's possible, kind of watching the trend of the radar. I'm going to activate it so you kind of get an idea of where it is moving. The one upside, if this were to make its way, it's got a pretty decent distance to cross. As I said, there is only a little bit of an easterly component to this motion. It's generally south to north. I'd venture to say that a lot of these will start weakening long before they would make it, if they were to even make it. These are all kind of wrapping around, like you talk about hurricanes and storms kind of wrapping around that center. These are all in association with, and I'll widen out the radars to show you can see the spin clearly just south of Lake Charles. These are all in association with this low. It's an upper and surface level low, and so they're basically kind of wrapping around this. If this were to continue along a trajectory moving a little bit closer, then these lines themselves would also start moving a little bit closer. The models have been trending that this low is going to move north, which would mean that these storms should more or less continue moving from south to north. So I don't foresee those, and we were looking at some of the models, I don't foresee that becoming more of an issue. Not to say we are done with the rainfall across Mid-City Lakeview, because we still do have some passing showers here. If we were to by chance get into that line, at least that rain is moving. So it would not be that stationary type cell that we saw earlier in the afternoon.
Well, that's good. And we are hearing from Colin Arnold, who has had a chance to take a look at the reports for the pump stations. Apparently one of the pumps at Station 6, which handles Lakeview and some of Mid-City, if I remember correctly, one of the pumps is down, but they do have a number of pumps at that station. It's a very large station, so there should be adequate redundancy there to help drain the area. I think my main question was pump station 12, which is in Lakeview, and he is not saying that that station is down. So hopefully the water is really starting to recede before we get any more rainfall.
Well, I will say I was shocked at the progress of the water coming down at the Canal Boulevard underpass, because as we said, near the top of the hour at 3 o'clock, it was at about 4 feet, and Eleanor was reporting it was still inching upwards. Even after the rain had ended, that water was starting to still kind of flow as what natural drainage we have. As that water was still flowing to that low spot, water was still rising. It probably peaked at around 4 feet, and then before 4 o'clock, at about quarter till, we saw the water level drop below 2 feet. So it does look like there has been some progress.
All right, Chris, we're starting to get more pictures and videos into the station right now. We'll show you all of those in the Eyewitness News at 5 o'clock, coming up in about 45 minutes, 50 minutes. So in the meantime, you can always download our weather app and, of course, go to WWLTV.com for the latest.
And we'll see you at 5.
From WWL-TV's Eyewitness News, this has been your local weather expert alert, sponsored by Egan Insurance Agency.